Okay, so you know how you were telling us about how you're trying to figure out how to like really boost your brain power?
Huh.
And you were specifically interested in superfoods and whether they could actually help you focus better.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we thought that was a really cool idea, something we could definitely dive into together. It's almost like we could try to unlock a cheat code for your mind or something, you
Yeah,
know?
like a brain hack. It
Exactly.
is a pretty fascinating thing to explore. And what makes your situation even more interesting for this deep dive is you didn't just like read a bunch of articles or anything. You actually did your own little experiment.
Right.
Yeah, you spent a whole week eating 8 specific superfoods every day just to see if you noticed any changes in how your brain was working.
Uh-huh.
So we have those personal observations from you, and then we also have some broader information about these foods in general.
Mm.
So what we want to do today is pull out the most useful insights from both of those things, your experience and the general knowledge. We're going to look at what they suggest about how these foods might be able to help with things like memory, focus, mood, just overall brain power.
Right. Get the core information without going too deep.
Yeah, we want to make sure you get the good stuff without overwhelming you with too many details.
That's exactly it. Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. The one big theme that kept popping up in your notes, and it's something that comes up all the time when people talk about health, is this idea that what you eat is directly connected to how well your brain works.
Totally.
It's not just about having enough energy to get through the day. It's
Exactly.
actually about like the basic building blocks that your brain needs to form memories, concentrate, even just feel good emotionally.
Yeah,
And initially, you were really drawn to superfoods, almost like you could sense that they held some kind of key to making your brain work better.
like an intuition.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's actually pretty cool from like a biological standpoint is that these foods we call superfoods, they're not just hype.
Right.
A lot of times they have like a ton of very specific nutrients that science has shown are super important for having a healthy brain.
Oh,
You
oh.
can almost think of it as like giving your brain premium fuel
I like that.
and the best possible building materials so that all those processes in your brain can work at their best.
Right. So when we talk about why these particular foods get called superfoods, especially when it comes to the brain, your notes highlighted a few key types of compounds.
Okay?
The first one was antioxidants.
Right.
Now, that's a word we hear everywhere.
It is.
What exactly do antioxidants do for our brains?
Okay, imagine that your brain cells are constantly being bombarded by these tiny little stressors,
Okay.
kind of like microscopic bumper cars,
Okay.
and they're causing damage over time. These bumper cars are kind of similar to what we call free radicals. They're basically unstable molecules that can make your body age faster and cause wear and tear, and that includes your brain.
Uh-huh.
Now, antioxidants, which you can find in a lot of superfoods, they basically act like a protective shield.
Oh, okay.
They neutralize those free radicals and help keep your brain cells safe from that constant damage.
That's a really good analogy, like a force field for your brain.
Yeah.
So you also mentioned omega-3 fatty acids, and it seems like everyone knows that those are good for you, especially for your brain.
Yeah,
Can you break it down for us? What do they actually do?
absolutely. So omega-3s are essential fats. Now, what that means is that our bodies can't actually make them on their own.
Hmm.
We have to get them from the food we eat.
Okay.
And they're a really important part of brain cell membranes. That's like the outer layer of each brain cell.
Mm-hmm.
You can think of those membranes as being really crucial for communication between the brain cells. Omega-3s basically help keep those membranes fluid, kind of flexible, which then helps with efficient signaling.
Okay.
Research has shown pretty strongly that they play a good role in things like learning and memory.
Uh-huh.
They might even help protect your brain from age-related decline.
Hmm.
It's almost like they're making sure that the communication lines in your brain are clear and fast.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, besides those two big categories, your notes also mention the importance of just getting enough essential nutrients in general, vitamins, minerals.
Yeah.
It seems like taking a holistic approach to feeding your brain is really important.
It is.
Yeah.
The brain is incredibly complicated.
Oh, yeah.
It needs a ton of different nutrients. Different vitamins and minerals do all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
From helping produce neurotransmitters, those are the chemicals that let brain cells talk to each other,
Yeah.
to helping transmit nerve signals.
Okay.
So making sure you're getting a wide range of those micronutrients really gives your brain the basic support it needs for pretty much all of its functions.
Right. Okay, so now we're getting a better understanding of why these dietary recommendations are so important. You're exploring all this because, like a lot of people, you've probably had those moments where your brain just doesn't seem to be working right.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like when you can't remember something or you just can't seem to focus.
Yeah, happens to all of us.
Yeah,
And it's actually really encouraging that making smart changes to your diet can be a super powerful way to deal with those everyday brain challenges.
that is good to hear. So, in your notes, you specifically talked about those little memory slips that a lot of us experience, especially as we get older.
Right.
You noticed that certain foods have actually been linked to improvements in memory.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that some of the compounds in certain foods seem to support the neural pathways that are involved in how we make and retrieve memories.
Ah,
It's not about suddenly being able to remember everything perfectly.
right. Yeah.
It's more about strengthening the basic processes that help us learn and remember things more effectively.
And then there's the whole issue of focus, which is something I think everybody struggles with, especially in our world where there are distractions everywhere.
Yeah, it's constant.
You were hoping that changing your diet could help with that too.
Yeah, absolutely. When your brain is getting a steady supply of the energy it needs and the building blocks it needs, it's just better equipped to pay attention and process information without getting overloaded.
Okay.
You can think of it as having like a more stable, reliable mental engine that can run for longer without breaking down.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So you also touched on the bigger picture of aging healthfully and how eating nutrient-rich foods regularly might help protect against cognitive decline as we age.
That's a really important point about being proactive with your brain health.
Yeah.
More and more evidence is showing that if you eat a diet that's consistently full of those essential nutrients, it can really contribute to your brain cells being more resilient and living longer.
Mm.
So it's almost like you're investing in the long-term health of your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And lastly, that sluggish feeling of brain fog, that mental fatigue that just doesn't go away. I think we've all been there, especially after a long day or if we haven't gotten enough sleep.
Oh, for sure.
Mm.
And, that feeling can actually be a sign that your brain isn't getting the specific fuel or nutrients that it needs to work at its best.
Okay.
So if you give it the right building blocks, you might see some really noticeable improvements in how clearly you can think and how much energy you have throughout the day.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about why all of this is important. Now let's get to the stars of your experiment, the 8 superfoods you ate for a week.
Right.
Let's just name them all so we're all on the same page. Blueberries, salmon, spinach, walnuts, avocados, eggs, turmeric, and dark chocolate.
There you go.
That sounds like a pretty delicious week of eating to me.
It's a nice variety, for sure.
Yeah.
And each one has its own special mix of nutrients that are good for you. What's really interesting is how each one and all of them together help your brain in different ways.
So in your notes, it seems like you were especially excited about blueberries. You really focused on those.
Yeah.
What was it about blueberries that stood out to you when you were researching them and then actually eating them?
Well, blueberries are amazing because they have a really high concentration of a specific type of antioxidant. It's called anthocyanin.
Okay.
That's actually what gives them their bright blue color.
Oh, wow.
And there's a lot of research that's pretty convincing. It suggests that if you eat blueberries regularly, it can actually improve both your memory and your overall cognitive function.
Hmm.
Pretty cool.
You even found some scientific studies that suggested blueberries might help reduce the risk of serious brain conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia. That's a pretty big deal, right?
It is. And while we're still learning more about it, the evidence we have now definitely points to those antioxidants in blueberries having what we call neuroprotective effects.
Okay.
Basically, they help shield brain cells from damage and keep them working the way they should.
So from a practical standpoint, which I think is always important, you also mentioned how easy and enjoyable it is to actually eat blueberries.
Oh, totally.
They're not some rare ingredient that's hard to find.
Right. You can throw them in a smoothie in the morning, put them on your oatmeal or yogurt.
Mm-hmm.
You can even toss them in a salad for a little bit of sweetness. They're so versatile and delicious. It makes them a really easy way to get more nutrients in your diet.
It sounds like the experts generally agree that blueberries are a great choice when it comes to keeping your brain healthy and just feeling good overall.
That seems to be the consensus. Most people consider them a valuable part of a balanced diet.
Okay.
And the science backs up their brain benefits more and more.
So blueberries get a thumbs up. But let's zoom out a little bit. Looking at all the other superfoods you tried during that week, what were some of the main takeaways? Like what benefits did you see mentioned consistently across those other foods?
Well, if you look at the bigger picture with all these foods, the benefits really highlight the idea that eating a variety of nutrients is the best way to support your brain health.
Okay.
For example, salmon. That's a great source of those crucial omega-3 fatty acids we talked about,
Right.
which are super important for brain cell structure and how those cells communicate.
Hmm.
Spinach is loaded with iron, which is essential, and other nutrients that help with energy and brain function.
Hmm.
Walnuts are packed with healthy fats, antioxidants, and even some vitamins that are good for your brain.
Right.
Avocados are full of monounsaturated fats, which are good for overall brain function and blood flow.
Uh-huh.
Eggs are a fantastic source of protein and choline.
Hmm.
That's something your brain needs to make a neurotransmitter that's important for memory. Turmeric has curcumin in it, which has shown some promise in supporting brain health because of its anti-inflammatory properties.
Hmm.
And even dark chocolate, if you eat it in moderation, gives you flavonoids.
Okay.
Those can have a positive effect on your mood and how well you think.
It's really interesting how each of these foods has slightly different benefits, but they all contribute to making your brain work better and maybe even protecting it as you get older.
That's it, exactly.
So you're basically saying that to get all these benefits, you don't have to completely change your diet.
No, not at all.
Right.
It can be as simple as adding some berries to your breakfast, having a handful of walnuts as a snack,
Hmm.
making sure you eat fish a couple of times a week, putting some leafy greens in your lunch. Small, consistent changes can make a real difference over time.
And you made a really good point in your notes about comparing these healthy foods to the ones we know aren't doing our brains any good, like foods that are high in sugar, salt, and unhealthy fats.
Yeah, that's a crucial distinction.
Mm.
Just like certain nutrients can fuel and protect your brain, eating too much sugar, salt, and bad fats
Hmm.
has been linked to all sorts of negative effects on brain function.
Hmm.
They can cause inflammation and basically get in the way of your brain working at its best.
Right. So the big takeaway seems to be that we need to focus on eating whole, nutrient-dense foods if we want to support our brain power.
That's the core message.
Yeah.
When you focus on those kinds of foods, you're giving your brain what it needs to function at its best. And that can lead to a better mood, sharper thinking, and a lower risk of cognitive problems as you get older.
Now, as you were finishing up that week of eating all these superfoods, you came to a sort of personal conclusion and a suggestion for anyone listening who might be interested in trying this themselves.
Yeah, I did.
What was it?
Well, the idea was to encourage people to explore and see what works for them.
Yeah.
To suggest that they try adding some of these superfoods to their diet and see if they notice any subtle changes, like in their energy levels, their focus, or their memory.
Mm.
And also to think about what their own go-to brain-boosting foods might already be,
Hmm.
because it's really a personal journey.
Right. So to sum up our deep dive today, it seems like there's a lot of evidence that eating these nutrient-rich superfoods like those amazing blueberries, the salmon that's full of omega-3s, and all the other great foods you tried can really support and enhance our brain health in so many ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to think about.
Okay.
Of all the superfoods we talked about, which ones seem the easiest or the most appealing for you to add to your regular meals?
Hmm.
What small changes to your diet could you realistically make to start exploring how these foods might benefit your own brain function? Remember, even little changes you make consistently in what you eat
Mm.
can make a big difference in how you feel and think over time. And it's a really cool area to keep exploring on your own.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.